Bombshell tonight in the Nolan Wells investigation. A mystery altercation emerges. And not with the guys that took him to the island on the boat. Does this change things? We cannot ignore it. Good evening. I'm Nancy Grace. This is Crime Stories. I want to thank you for being with us.
If people are sending in videos, they should be using those videos to conduct further investigation.
There is a group of people fighting at 5 p.m. Who are they? Where was he? He wasn't floating in the water. He wasn't on the ship.
A group of young men takes a trip to a barrier island off the Mississippi Gulf Coast, and only one of them does not make it home. His name is Nolan Wells, a college football player, 18 years old. The others return to the mainland. He does not, and the question that has been sitting at the center of this case, unanswered, documented but not resolved, is what happened in the 30 minutes between when that boat left Horn Island and when Nolan Wells was no longer anywhere to be found. First, there is the timeline. A boat called the Triton reportedly leaves Horn Island at approximately 4:30 in the afternoon. Nolan's phone is on that boat. Nolan, according to the people who were with him, is not. Second, there is a reported altercation. Social media accounts, later circulated in DMs and described to investigative reporters, place a group of individuals in what witnesses describe as an almost fight at approximately 5 o'clock that same evening. That is 30 minutes after the Triton has already gone.
We think after the Triton left Horn Island.
Nancy, this is a mystery altercation that is being described through social media as something that took place around 5 p.m. that day. This is 30 minutes after the Triton already left. And in this particular account, a Bertram boat was seen leaving shortly afterward at a high rate of speed. Now, this social media conversation claims that a person, one of the passengers, pretty certain Nolan Wells, was part of a group that was, quote, almost fighting around 5 p.m.
Third, there is a second forensic examination commissioned by the family, conducted in Washington, D.C., described by forensic experts as among the most thorough post-mortem dissections possible on remains in advanced decomposition. It raises more questions than it closes. This video is not here to name a suspect. No one has been charged. No arrest has been made. What we are here to do is look at what is actually documented, separate it from what has been amplified online without verification, and sit with what the record genuinely does not yet resolve. Let's start at the beginning. Horn Island is a barrier island in the Gulf of Mexico, part of the Gulf Islands national seashore, reachable only by boat. It is remote. It is not staffed with regular personnel. There are no security cameras. There is no infrastructure that would generate automatic digital records of who arrived and who left and when. That context matters, because so much of what is being argued publicly about this case depends on timelines, and timelines in a place like Horn Island are only as reliable as the people and devices that recorded them. What is documented is this: Nolan Wells traveled to Horn Island with a group on a boat called the Triton. According to reporting, that group left the island at approximately 4:30 p.m. Nolan's phone, by multiple accounts, was on that boat when it departed. Nolan's body was later recovered from the water. He had not returned to the mainland with the group. Now here is where the documented record starts to thin out and where the unverified starts to rush in to fill the gap. Social media accounts, circulating in the days and weeks following Nolan's disappearance, began describing a separate incident at Horn Island, allegedly around 5 o'clock that same afternoon. One widely discussed account involves a private DM sent by a witness who claims to have seen Nolan involved in what they described as an argument or near fight with at least one other person. That DM reportedly included a warning to the recipient, telling them, in substance, that the person they were arguing with Nolan would spend the rest of their life in prison. This is where we need to be careful and precise. That DM has not been independently verified. It has not been entered into any court record. It has not been confirmed by law enforcement. What it represents is an account shared secondhand, originating from a platform where misinformation can travel as fast as genuine evidence. The person who allegedly sent that DM has not, as of the reporting available for this video, publicly identified themselves or given a sworn statement to authorities. That does not mean it is false. It means it is unverified. And in a case like this, unverified and false are not the same thing, but they are also not the same thing as documented.
Yes.
Listen.
But the person said in the DM to another kid that is associated, not any of the kids that I interviewed to talk to, but that could be associated to some degree, that knew Nolan, that this person wrote a message saying, me and my husband saw you arguing with Nolan, and to the effect of, you're going to spend the rest of your life in prison. Nolan and another person that he may have been in an argument with, to me, are people that need to be investigated.
This is a distinction that matters enormously, and it is one that the online conversation around this case has consistently failed to honor. Here is something worth sitting with. The people who were on the Triton with Nolan have been the central focus of public attention since this story broke. That focus may or may not be warranted. But if the reported 5 p.m. altercation is accurate, and if the Triton had already left Horn Island by 4:30, then whoever was involved in that altercation was not on the Triton. They were a separate group, arriving and departing on a separate vessel, a Bertram boat, reportedly seen leaving the area shortly after 5 p.m. at high speed.
Telling the truth.
Sure.
I wanted to talk about this mystery altercation. If it happened at 5 p.m., that boat was already gone. Now, as much as some people want to hang the young guys on the boat, I want to make sure we hang the right person. If there is a mystery altercation after that boat left, we need to be investigating that altercation.
Law enforcement has the tools to investigate this. GPS data from marine vessels, cell site location information, digital records from marina logs. These are real investigative resources. Whether they have been fully pursued and what they have returned has not been made public as of the reporting available here.
There's a specific timeline
Put
from
him
what I
up.
read.
Put him
They
up.
needed assistance on their boat. They left at 4:30.
You
They had
just
called
gave me
CTO.
a chill
So
down my spine.
if
You
so,
can't
if there
introduce
is-
something because people say, I don't care what people say, on either side.
No.
They mean nothing to me. What?
Nancy, that's the problem when we have things like podcasts today and people who are not qualified to talk about serious things like this. They're not experts. They want to get likes. Law enforcement is going to keep information
He
close to the
said
vest.
he
What we do know is that the investigation is described as ongoing. Now let's talk about the forensic picture, because this is where the documented record gets genuinely complicated and where the online conversation has been most prone to misrepresentation. A second autopsy was conducted on Nolan Wells's remains by a forensic pathologist retained by the family. Based in Washington, D.C., that examination is described in available reporting as exceptionally thorough, involving a multi-layered dissection technique that, according to the examining physician, was not employed by the state medical examiner's office in Mississippi.
Back, this focal area that they're talking about is, and I come back to this all the time, Nancy, is that his body, Nolan's body, is in such a state of decomposition to this point that he cannot make a definitive assessment on that area. And he did a multi-layered dissection, which, by the way, according to him, had not been done by the state medical examiner's office in Mississippi. He just went about it a different way. And as a matter of fact, if you like that one, I got another one. The examination that this physician in D.C. did on Nolan's remains ranks right up there with the most thorough, hear me talking, the most thorough dissection that you can possibly do on human remains. It's the same one that we do on bodies that have died, individuals that have died that have been incarcerated, in custody deaths. You know what all that means: in the back of a cruiser, in a holding cell, in a prison. Those autopsies rank right up there with the most thorough that we can go. It's a very deep.
That second examination identified a focal area of deep tissue discoloration at the back of Nolan's skull, in the occipital region. That is the base of the skull. If you struck someone from behind, or if someone struck the back of their head against a hard surface, that is where the injury would present.
Joe Scott, there's a big, thank you. There's a big honking mark, subcutaneous, deep reddening tissue on his occipital. If I hit somebody in the back of the head, it'd be right there. We don't know what that is.
No, we don't. But to Cheryl's point, she's accurate. And here's why. Because in forensics, it's not just about positive findings, it's also about negative findings, those things that we are absent. So in that report, as she had mentioned, there was no indication that there was any kind of contusions on the hand, the arm, no kind of defensive event like a parry with a forearm, scuffing of the knuckles, that sort of thing. This forensic pathologist that did the second assessment didn't see any evidence of that. And so that.
Here is what the record also shows. The examining physician noted significant decomposition, and because of the level of decomp, a definitive conclusion about the nature of that occipital finding could not be made. It was documented. It was flagged. It was not explained. At the same time, the second autopsy reportedly found no evidence of abrasions, contusions, or trauma to Nolan's hands or forearms. No scuffing of the knuckles. No defensive injury pattern. These are what forensic examiners call negative findings, and in forensic science, negative findings carry weight alongside positive ones. This is where the record creates a genuine interpretive tension, and it is worth naming clearly. The argument made by some forensic commentators is this: if the body is decomposed enough that the occipital mark cannot be definitively interpreted, then it is inconsistent to claim with confidence that the hands show no evidence of a fight. Decomposition affects tissue everywhere. The counter-argument is that abrasions, the tearing away of the outer skin layer, are structurally different from contusions, and that an abrasion significant enough to result from a physical altercation involving a college football player would present differently and be more distinguishable even in advanced decomp. Both positions are made by credentialed forensic professionals. Neither is the settled answer. And anyone telling you that the autopsy conclusively proves or disproves a physical altercation is telling you something the report itself does not support.
Yeah.
But yet, on the other side of your mouth, you are claiming that even with this intense decomposition, you didn't see evidence of any reddening on his knuckles or any indication of a fight. So, you want it two ways. You want to say, decomp, can't tell what that was on the back of his head, but even though he's highly decomposed, I can tell you, he didn't have any reddening on his knuckles. Really?
No.
Because I see a problem with that.
Okay, you've skinned your knee before, right? Okay. If you have an abrasion, that's completely different than a contusion. That means you have scraping and the tearing away of the skin. That's something that's very obvious. And guess what? I've been in enough fist fights in my life that I know
reddening.
what scraping. Right, I know, and you're misstating that because it's not a matter of reddening. When we look at hands, we also look at contact points where people are being abraded as a result of scuffing their hands. That's different than a color discoloration. We're talking about the top layer, the epidermis down to the dermis, is being scraped away. He doesn't see any evidence of that in his.
This is a case that is being shaped in real time by the information ecosystem around it. And that ecosystem has a specific problem. Accounts that carry detail, accounts that feel specific, accounts that arrive through channels that feel semi-private, like DMs, tend to feel more credible than they may actually be. The witness who reportedly saw Nolan struggling in the water with another person, that account has circulated widely. It was described on at least one podcast as a significant lead. But the question raised by multiple analysts is straightforward. If you witness two people struggling in the water and one of them goes under, what do? You do not finish what you were doing and move on. The behavior implied by that account, witnessing it and not intervening, not reporting it immediately, not coming forward quickly, strains logic. That does not make it impossible, but it is a reason to hold it loosely.
Saw.
Another report came to me of someone saying that they saw Nolan with a girl, and they believed that they saw Nolan and this girl struggling in the water. not necessarily drowning, but struggling. Like it was obvious enough that the person was concerned when they saw Nolan in the water and he was with this girl.
You know, that's from Officer Tatum's show. Cheryl McCollum, it seems to me that that's not true. Because don't you think if a witness saw one or two people, quote, struggling in the water, I mean, I would try to help them.
It makes no sense.
And they
that
did
wouldn't
nothing?
yeah, it doesn't make any sense. That wouldn't be their focal, that they would pay attention to those two people that are struggling to see, is one going under and not resurfacing? What can we do to help? The idea that they would watch that, see a struggle, and then what?
Here is something that has received far less attention than the altercation and the autopsy, and it is documented. Nolan Wells' mother has stated publicly that her son was inseparable from his phone. That is her characterization, and it is consistent with what most people who knew him have said. The phone was on the Triton when it left. Nolan was not, according to the accounts of those who were on the boat.
Where's your cell phone? Where is your cell phone? And try not to lie. Where's your cell phone?
Okay. Right here.
Oh, really? Because here's mine. So, you want to tell me Nolan Wells stayed behind and his cell phone went without him? I understand. Don't everybody start screaming that he didn't want to get it wet. Of course he didn't want to get it wet. But there's ways around that. You can go put it on shore in your shoe, like everybody else does, to hide it from people, and then retrieve it when you go. But no, he let the boat leave with his.
His mother has also been subjected to anonymous calls reportedly requesting an investigation into her. She is a home healthcare nurse, a woman who has lost her son, who is actively cooperating with the search for answers, and who has been targeted by anonymous harassment in the middle of a grief she did not ask for. That detail is not forensic. It does not tell us what happened on Horn Island, but it tells us something about the environment this case is being investigated inside of, an environment where social pressure, public harassment, and viral misinformation are moving faster than verified evidence. Here is the question the documented record leaves genuinely open, and it is one worth thinking through carefully. If someone or multiple people were at Horn Island after 4:30, if there was a confrontation involving Nolan, and if a boat left that area at high speed around 5 p.m., then the question is not just what happened to Nolan Wells. The question is who else was there, and why have they not yet been publicly identified or brought forward as witnesses? Law enforcement has not confirmed whether those individuals have been interviewed. They have not confirmed whether the Bertram boat has been identified. They have not confirmed whether digital records from that time window have been obtained.
However, there's a reason why law enforcement does investigations. Professionals do it, not podcasters talking about it. Verified sources, all of that is nonsense. The police are going to keep information to themselves. They're going to also keep information private so they can test statements that come from people and verify what they're saying based on factors that don't get released in the media. So clearly something happened after 4:30 when the Triton boat apparently left. And all of these things the police will find, they will discover. You know, the police can discover whose phones were active at the time in that whole area if they choose. May not be able to use it in court anymore after the recent Supreme Court decision a few weeks ago on cell site location information. However, it's an investigative tool that they can line up who's there. They can also line these things up by the boats, right? And they're calling CETO and things like that. So these are all things the police are going to verify.
This is not a criticism of the investigation. Investigators routinely withhold this information. They do so deliberately to preserve the integrity of potential future proceedings, to protect information that allows them to test the accounts of people they interview. If you tell an investigator something that matches a detail only investigators know, that is a meaningful corroboration. If that detail is already public, it proves nothing. What is worth saying clearly is this. The 30-minute window between 4:30 and 5 o'clock on Horn Island is the center of this case. Everything worth investigating runs through it. The Triton's departure, the reported altercation, the unidentified boat, the phone left behind, the body recovered from the water. none of those pieces have been publicly reconciled into a coherent, verified sequence of events. That is the honest state of the record right now. If you have followed this case since the beginning, you have probably seen a version of events assembled online that felt complete and confident. This is one of the patterns that defines how cases like this get consumed publicly. The myth solidifies faster than the investigation does. The confident account crowds out the accurate one, and by the time the documented record catches up, the version people believe is already set. The investigation into Nolan Wells' death remains open. There is a documented reward for information leading to answers. If you have something, the number to call has been made public, and law enforcement has asked that anyone with first-hand knowledge come forward directly, not through social media.
Sure. I need their photo evidence if they have it. I need the eyewitnesses, the ear witnesses, who saw what, when did they see it, how can they prove it? So if they can tell me who was in the altercation with him, then we're going to bring them in if they haven't been brought in. If there's some type of something they've captured on video or a photograph, that would be great. If it's associated with a boat, does that boat have GPS? When did that boat leave? Where did they go? I want all of that. So, you take the totality. You don't just take one thing, but, you're not going to take somebody's word that just put something on.
There is a thread in this case that has not been fully pulled, and that is the documented question of who else was on or near Horn Island in that 30-minute window, not the people on the Triton. Someone else. That is where the next chapter of this story likely lies. If you have your own read on what the documented record actually shows, drop it in the comments. Not theories, not what you heard on a podcast. What you think the verified pieces, the timeline, the forensic findings, the phone, the reported DM, actually add up to. That is a real conversation worth having. Follow for the next case. The record is still being written.